Welcome to today's Council on Foreign Relations meeting with Dr. Shashi Tharoor. My name is Ken Juster. I'm a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and I'll be presiding over this morning's discussion. Due to some scheduling changes for Dr. Tharoor, our meeting is going to be a bit abbreviated, ending at 9:40. I'm going to engage in a question period with him for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us here this morning.
Good to see you
Shashi.
again.
He is one of India's leading statesmen, in addition to being a prolific author, commentator, and former international diplomat at the United Nations. You have his bio. I just want to add to it that he is currently the leader of the all-party team that has traveled to the United States. They were in New York earlier, to Panama, to Guyana, to Brazil, and to Colombia, to really rally support for India's war on terrorism emanating from Pakistan. So again, welcome, Shashi. And let me begin by asking you what the purpose was of your delegation, what messages you've been giving to others, and how you've been received in the countries you've been at.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, well, first of all, good to see you all here. Good morning. I have the privilege of leading this. We can't really call it an all-party delegation, but a multi-party delegation, because we have 41 parties in our lower house of parliament, and 5 of them are represented in my delegation. We also have our former ambassador in Washington with us, and we have been going to these countries as part of a sort of, if you like, a group of delegation. There are 7 going to different regions. Our region was the countries you mentioned: Guyana, Panama, Colombia, Brazil, and the US in that order. With, in fact, early morning, I beg your pardon, late night, when we first landed in New York, we went to the 9/11 memorial. And that, I think, set the tone for the trip, because we wanted to situate this problem right there in solidarity with victims of terrorism from around the world. As you remember, in 9/11, a lot of nationalities lost their lives. And for us, that became then a sort of leitmotif of our travels. Our message everywhere, and 3 of the countries I mentioned to you are Security Council members, either current or proximate next year. Panama being next year. And then the situation, I beg your pardon, Colombia being next year. Panama and Brazil and Guyana already on it. Right. And then for us, the message was very simply to enhance their understanding and appreciation for what we had just been through, and to seek their solidarity in our fight against terrorism. And there, I can tell you, Ken, we got literally everywhere an enormously positive response. The one country where there had been setback is too dramatic a word, but there'd been an unfortunate statement issued during our operation against the terror attacks was Colombia, which had surprised everybody by issuing a statement of heartfelt condolences for the Pakistani victims. When we sort of situated matters in context and explained exactly what had happened, and in particular the fact that our initial strike was purely retribution, and we didn't touch a single civilian target, government target, even a Pakistani military target. We just hit terror camps of designated terrorist organizations whose addresses are known, whose names are on the UN list as well as the State Department's terrorist designated list. When we explained all of that, they withdrew their statement. And that, I think, in the end was a useful win for us. But that small little sort of wrinkle apart, it's been, I must say, very positively smooth sailing everywhere else. We've been meeting everywhere: the executive branch, government officials, legislators, think tanks and policy wonks, media, and through the media, the general public.
There's a public diplomacy element to this as well as...
And everybody, I mean, right across the board, has been supportive. It's been our team is multi-partisan, as I said, but so has been the response. We've had people in government and opposition in all of these countries saying to us how much they appreciate what India is doing and how much they support India's right to defend itself against terror.
Has India done this sort of outreach in the past? And How is this similar or different from that?
Well, there was a similar outreach conducted under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh after the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack. And that really was, as you remember, horrendous. It was 170 people killed in a protracted terrorist assault over 3 days in 5 locations in Mumbai. That was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack, and we went around the world. I can't say we because I wasn't in that, but the all-party delegations did the same thing. There'd been a couple of other precedents for the sort of demonstration of national unity and resolve, where just as my own delegation has 5 political parties, 7 states or 8 states represented in its 8 members, 3 religions. I mean, we've really showcased, if you like, the unity in diversity of India. I would say that very similarly, in the past too, governments have sought to convey through opposition voices their national resolve on issues. Indira Gandhi in the 1971 war sent out some of her foremost critics. What became the 1971 war, ahead of the war, to explain India's concerns about the Bangladeshi refugees in India. 2008, I mentioned. In between, in 1994, our then Prime Minister invited the leader of the opposition to lead the Indian delegation to the UN debate on Kashmir at the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. So we've had such precedents before, and I would say that in many ways it's a good reflection on Indian democracy. That old line about, your political differences stop at the water's edge is true for us too. Once we cross our borders, we are one. We have our quarrels with the other side, and we'll settle them at home. We don't need to. That doesn't affect our perception of national interest and national security.
To what degree did your discussions focus primarily on the terrorist incident or also on the responses and the quick escalation of the fighting? Because I want to get into that with you as well, but I'm curious whether that was covered.
Sure. Well, I mean, Ken, the terrorist incident speaks for itself. It was a horrific incident, an atrocity that many of you must have read about in detail, where these terrorists came, innocent holiday makers on a tourist trip, and they asked people their religion, shot them in cold blood between the eyes, the men leaving, killing them in front of their wives and children. And when one sort of desperate woman screamed out in despair, "Shoot me too," she was told, "No, you go and tell them back in Delhi." That was sort of, "Go and tell Modi," I think was the line. That's the sort of cold-bloodedness and cynicism behind this terrorist assault. It was not some sort of random terrorist incident. It was meticulously planned and absolutely cruelly executed. So with all of that, the anger in India was palpable. I myself, and as you know, I chair the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, but I wrote in my personal capacity an op-ed urging that this time India had to hit hard, but hit smart. And I think that's exactly what the government did. It decided, it took a couple of weeks, it took aim at 9 terror sites, as I mentioned a little earlier. These sites were so precisely chosen and attacked that there was no collateral damage, but even then they also did it at 1:05 to 1:30 at night, so there wouldn't even be the slightest risk of civilians around if there was anything going awry. They then sent a signal to the world, the very next morning press briefing, and also to the Pakistanis. As far as we're concerned, we're done. We just wanted retribution against the terrorists. We've avoided any of your sites. We haven't tried to hit you or your country. So as far as we're concerned, we're done. But if you hit back, we will have no choice but to retaliate. In other words, the burden of escalation was entirely left to the Pakistanis. We had absolutely no desire to have this seen as the opening salvo in a protracted war. We weren't interested. I mean, you know, Ken, you've been ambassador in India. We're focused on our development, on our growth story, on investment, on IT, on pharma. All of this stuff is what's occupying our minds and our mind space. We really don't have time to be distracted by war and conflict. But we felt in this particular instance we had no choice. We had to exercise our right to self-defense, or they'd believe they could just walk across the border, kill people with impunity and go back again. So we really had to show them there would be a price to pay. That was the logic of what we did. Pakistan chose to retaliate, and rather irresponsibly. That is, they had indiscriminate artillery shelling across the line of control and across the border. They killed, unfortunately, people in a Sikh temple, a Gurudwara. They killed nuns and worshippers in the convent of the Carmelites of Mother Mary. They ended up hitting people in their homes, on the streets. 19 killed, 59 in hospital with grievous injuries. So India again said, you hit us, we're going to hit you back. And we hit back as well. And this went on for 88 hours. I don't want to tell the whole story, but at the very end of it, on the final night, which was the night of the 9th and 10th of May, our first attack was the night of 6th and 7th of May. So the end of 88 hours, we ended up hitting 11 Pakistani military sites. These were military airfields. And there are sort of publicly available satellite pictures, not Indian, but from any commercial satellite, showing craters on the runways, buildings damaged and subsequently demolished by the Pakistanis because they couldn't be rendered operational anymore. So extensive damage was done. And at the end of all of that, the Director General of Military Operations from Pakistan reached out to his Indian counterpart and said, we are ready to call it off. And we said, we've been telling you every day, you stop, we stop. You hit, we hit. It's as simple as that. So you're stopping, we'll stop. And that was the end of that. 88 hours. Very, very sad, frustrating. We didn't want this. We didn't want a conflict. But terrorism has to stop. And so our message wherever we went was to tell people, this is what happened. This is what we did in response. We hope you understand. And unanimously, it's been, yes, we understand.